A blinding shockwave of hypercompressed gas erupted from the side of the SM-3 Block YB interceptor as its divert and attitude control system fired in the total silence of the exo-atmosphere. 10 small thrusters hissed, nudging a 150-pound slab of sensors into a precise intercept corridor 100 miles above the Red Sea. There was only the violent shattering of a Houthi ballistic missile as it was struck at a combined closing speed of Mach 13. The kill web had already marked this target for termination 2 minutes before the collision. This was the final pulse of a 1,200-mile digital handshake. When the Houthi military media released footage of their mobile launchers in the Yemeni desert on Friday, March 27, 2026, they were advertising a revolution. In reality, they were broadcasting a spectral signature that the U.S. Navy's Invisible Spider had been waiting to catch. The launch from Sana'a triggered a sequence that moved at the speed of light, involving a satellite constellation, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, and an integrated logic gate that refuses to blink. The space-based infrared system satellite, parked in geosynchronous orbit, performed a sub-second spectral analysis of the Houthi missile's plume. Within 3 heartbeats of ignition, the kill web knew the precise chemical composition of the fuel, the thrust-to-weight ratio of the engine, and the exact oscillation of the airframe. This is the first layer of the predatory web. Every engine ignition on the planet leaves a digital footprint, and the Houthi missile, a long-range variant aimed at the Israeli port of Eilat, glowed like a flare in a dark room. The satellite sent a track file. This track file is a high-resolution 3D model of the threat, updated dozens of times per second. It was immediately handed off to the Aegis combat system on an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer patrolling the Red Sea. The ship's SPY-1 radar wasn't even pointed at Yemen yet. The kill web uses a protocol called Launch on Remote. The destroyer fired its SM-3 interceptor based entirely on the satellite's data, trusting the Invisible Spider to guide the weapon into the target's path. The vertical launch system cells on the ship's deck blew open with a thunderous mechanical crack. The SM-3 Block YB exited the ship in a pillar of white flame, clearing the mast in less than a second. The first stage burned out and fell into the sea, leaving the second stage to push the interceptor into the blackness of space. As the interceptor entered the vacuum, it began its search. The kill web was now stitching together data from the destroyer's radar, a ground-based TPY-2 radar in the Negev desert, and the infrared sensors of the satellite. This is the data fusion phase. It creates a single undeniable truth for the weapon to follow. Inside the Combat Information Center of the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, the screen showed a composite track. This wasn't a human-interpreted map. It was a high-fidelity rendering of the threat's exact position in 3-dimensional space. The Aegis system monitored the Houthi missile's apogee, calculating the cooling rate of its skin as it left the atmosphere. We're looking at a level of automation here that would have seemed like science fiction to anyone who stood watch with a grease pencil. But the software running this kill web was built on the logic and the grit of the veterans who spent decades learning how to read a raw radar return in a heavy sea state. If you were part of that transition, or if you're currently watching these screens in the Red Sea, tell us, does this level of automation make the mission feel more secure, or do you miss having the final feel for the target? We're reading every comment. While the SM-3 was climbing, the conflict escalated. The State of Israel had launched precision strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities near Qom, killing 6 people and bypassing hardened defenses. Iran launched a barrage of ballistic missiles and drones toward central Israel, while Hezbollah units in southern Lebanon unleashed a storm of over 100 rockets. This was an attempt to DDoS the system to flood the kill web with so many tracks that the logic gates would jam. This is where the triage protocol takes over. An integrated defense system doesn't try to stop everything. It evaluates the lethality score of every incoming round. The Iron Dome batteries and the David Sling system were now being fed data from the Navy's destroyers. The kill web analyzed the trajectory of every Hezbollah rocket. If a rocket was projected to hit a field or the Mediterranean, the system marked it as ignored. By allowing the trash to fall, the system preserved its limited supply of Tamir and Stunner interceptors for the tracks that posed a lethal threat. The Arrow 3 system took the high-altitude Iranian targets in the exo-atmosphere, while the David Sling engaged the medium-range threats re-entering the air. However, one Iranian rocket slipped through. It struck a residential building in Ramat Gan, east of Tel Aviv. The kinetic energy of the impact turned the structure into a shell of twisted metal and shattered concrete. One person was killed. This hit was immediately logged by the kill web as a reverse beacon. Within 400 milliseconds of the impact, the system used the point of contact to backtrack the launch trajectory. Before the dust had even settled in Tel Aviv, the exact coordinates of the mobile launcher in Iran were being transmitted to a pair of F-35 Lightning II fighters circling the Persian Gulf. The Spider had felt the vibration on its web and was already moving to eliminate the source. Back in the silence of space, the SM-3 kinetic kill vehicle detached from its third-stage booster. The KW has its own infrared seeker, its own thrusters, and its own brain. It is looking for a specific cubic inch of the Houthi missile's airframe. The Houthi missile was traveling at over 3,000 miles per hour. The KW was traveling at nearly 7,000 miles per hour in the opposite direction. At these speeds, traditional explosives are a liability. The kill web relies on hit-to-kill technology, the pure transfer of kinetic energy. When a 150-pound object traveling at Mach 13 strikes a target, the energy release is equivalent to a multi-ton truck hitting a wall at 600 miles per hour, but focused into an area the size of a dinner plate. The KW's divert and attitude control system fired its last pulse. The Houthi missile attempted a terminal maneuver, but the kill web had already predicted the shift. The KW struck the Houthi missile exactly at its center of mass. The missile was molecularly disassembled. It turned into cold scrap metal, continuing its arc as harmless debris before burning up upon re-entry. The Houthis' first direct strike on Israel in this war was neutralized by a system that had solved the equation before the militants had even finished their celebratory chants. The Houthis claimed their fingers were on the trigger for a blockade of the Red Sea. They targeted the Bab al-Mandab Strait, a 18-mile-wide choke point that handles a massive portion of global energy trade. They believed their geography was a weapon. The kill web responded by making geography irrelevant. To counter the Houthi threat, the Navy deployed an airtight logic loop. Using E-2D Hawkeye aircraft, the Navy established a continuous sensor grid over the Yemeni coast. Every time a Houthi mobile launcher moved out of its cave or hardened shelter, its heat signature was tagged by an MQ-4C Triton drone. Consider the interception of a Houthi Samad-3 drone. These are low-tech fiberglass lawnmowers designed to force the Navy into a cost trap. The Houthis want the Navy to fire a $2 million SM-2 missile at a $30,000 drone. Instead, an EA-18G Growler detected the drone's satellite uplink. The Growler whispered a digital command into the drone's ear. The drone's GPS was spoofed. Its command link was severed and it fell silently into the sea. Cost of the defense: a few gallons of jet fuel and a burst of radio energy. Cost of the Houthi failure total. The kill web is predatory because it is recursive. It maps the origin. While the Iron Dome was shredding Hezbollah rockets over northern Israel, the Aegis destroyers were busy reverse engineering the launch sites. Every rocket that enters the air provides a piece of data. By stitching together the launch points of over 100 rockets, the kill web created a high-definition target map of Hezbollah's tactical infrastructure. The data from the Red Sea destroyers was fed into the F-35 Lightning II pathfinding computers. The stealth fighters used this data to navigate the seams of the enemy's radar coverage, hitting the launchers before they could be reloaded. The enemy thinks they are firing from the shadows. In Yemen, the Houthi commanders were preparing for a second wave of strikes, but the Spider had already felt the vibration. An unmanned surface vessel, a ghost ship with infrared cameras, had been monitoring the launch sites. When the Houthis moved to reload the kill web, assigned a strike to a pair of FA-18E Super Hornets launched from a carrier over the horizon. The Houthi trigger finger was cut off before it could pull again. Everything that happened on Saturday morning was governed by a single, relentless clock. From the ignition of the Houthi missile in Yemen to the kinetic impact of the SM-3 in space, only 94 seconds elapsed. In that 94 seconds, thousands of calculations were performed. The kill web had to distinguish between the Houthi missile and its discarded booster stage. It had to coordinate with the Arrow 3 batteries in Israel to ensure they weren't targeting the same threat. It had to perform a kill assessment to determine if a second interceptor was needed. This is the new reality of warfare. It is no longer about who has the most missiles or the loudest spokesman. It is about who can process the data the fastest. Yahya Saraya and the Houthi leadership are fighting a 20th century war of resistance and territory. They believe that if they control a mountain in Yemen, they control the fight. The U.S. Navy is fighting a 21st century war of information and sequence. We have turned the entire Middle East into a giant digital trap. As the sun rose over the Red Sea on Saturday morning, the kill web was still hunting. The backtrack data from the Ramat Gan impact had been finalized and pushed to the fleet in a matter of seconds. 2 F-35C Lightning, 2 fighters operating in the silent seams of Iranian radar, released a pair of GBU-53/B Stormbreaker munitions. These smart bombs hunted. Using their tri-mode seekers to see through the morning haze, they glided toward the exact GPS coordinates of the mobile launcher that had fired on Tel Aviv. The launcher was vaporized in a 500-pound precision blast before the crew could even finish their post-strike retreat. Simultaneously, the Spider reached into Yemen. An MQ-9 Reaper, loitering 20,000 feet over a wadi outside Sana'a, identified a second Houthi ballistic missile being prepped for flight. The drone didn't wait for a second launch. A single Hellfire missile struck the oxygen-fed fuel truck, triggering a massive secondary explosion that turned the $15 million weapon into a pillar of fire visible for miles. To clear the path for international shipping, a flight of F/A-18E Super Hornets launched AGM-88 HARM missiles that snaked down the throats of Houthi coastal radar stations, blinding them in a series of targeted electronic kills. The kill web was systematically removing the enemy's ability to even look at it. This engagement proved that the era of geography is dead. When a Houthi commander hides in a mountain cave 1,200 miles away, roughly the distance from Houston to Chicago, he thinks distance is his armor. But to the kill web, he is merely an 18-minute flight time on a digital map. The ultimate lesson for every adversary in the region is simple. You cannot win a war of firepower against a navy that has mastered the sequence. Logic doesn't care about your ideology, it only cares about your coordinates, and once you pull the trigger, you have already broadcasted your location to a system that never blinks. The Houthi blockade failed to stop a single cargo ship. The Iranian saturation attack cost millions of dollars in ordnance, only to hit a residential street and reveal their entire launch infrastructure to our sensors. While the Houthi military media continues to broadcast threats to an empty desert, the global economy continues to move through the Bab al-Mandab Strait as if they aren't even there. That is the true power of the kill web. It makes them irrelevant. The world didn't stop on Saturday morning. Energy prices didn't spike. The global supply chain didn't break. For the axis of resistance, it was a strategic catastrophe that burned through 40 years of investment in a single weekend. For the U.S. Navy, it was a successful validation of the math. The gate remains closed, the watch remains set, and the sequence remains airtight. The invisible spider is already resetting for the next vibration on the web. Dismissed.